My name is Samantha, 33 years old, and a forensic accountant. At our family Thanksgiving dinner, I overheard my parents and my sister laughing about how they were going to humiliate me and hand me a $40,000 invoice to fund her luxury lifestyle. So I walked out without a word, leaving only a red velvet box on the formal dining table. 2 hours later, my phone rang with my father screaming and my sister wailing in pure agony. I just smiled and hung up. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. The smell of roasted turkey and sage stuffing filled the air of my parents' sprawling suburban home. It was supposed to be a picture-perfect Thanksgiving, the kind my mother Brenda lived to showcase to her country club friends. I was carrying a heavy silver tray of appetizers down the hallway toward the kitchen when the sound of hushed conspiratorial laughter stopped me in my tracks. The door was slightly ajar. Through the crack, I could see my mother, my father Thomas, and my 29-year-old sister Ashley huddled around the kitchen island. Ashley was swirling a glass of expensive wine, looking flawless in her designer dress. She was a lifestyle influencer, or at least she played one on the internet, constantly projecting an image of limitless wealth. "Make sure you do it right before we slice the turkey, Dad," Ashley said, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "When we raise our glasses, you hand her the invoice. $40,000 for all the years you supported her. She does not have a husband or kids, so her money is just sitting in a bank account anyway. Just tell her it is her mandatory contribution for my new Tesla." My father chuckled, taking a sip of his bourbon. "We have to corner her in front of Malcolm. That boring accountant is too obsessed with her pride. She will not dare say no or make a scene in front of company, especially not in front of her successful brother-in-law." My mother joined in the laughter, waving her manicured hand dismissively. "It is about time Samantha paid her fair share. Look at Ashley. Her husband just bought her a massive estate. Meanwhile, Samantha just stares at spreadsheets all day. She needs to understand her place in this family. She exists to support her sister." I stood frozen in the hallway, the heavy silver tray digging into my hands. Any other person might have dropped the tray. Any other daughter might have burst into the room crying and demanding to know how her own flesh and blood could be so spectacularly heartless. But I am not any other person. I am a forensic accountant. My entire career is built on maintaining absolute emotional control while dismantling complex webs of fraud. Hearing them plot to extort me to use my brother-in-law Malcolm as an audience to force my compliance did not break my heart. It completely crystallized my resolve. They viewed me as nothing more than a lifeless ATM, a boring spinster they could bully into funding Ashley's fake reality. I did not shed a single tear. I took a slow, silent breath, backed away from the kitchen door, and walked quietly into the formal dining room. The long table was set beautifully with crystal goblets, fine china, and expensive linen napkins. It looked like a magazine cover, utterly fake and perfectly arranged. I set the tray of appetizers down on a side console. Then I reached into my oversized leather tote bag. I had come to this dinner prepared, though they had no idea. I pulled out a heavy rectangular box wrapped in rich red velvet. I walked over to Ashley's designated seat at the head of the table and placed the box right in the center of her pristine white plate. I pulled a pen from my purse and grabbed one of my mother's elegant place cards. In sharp, clean handwriting, I wrote a simple message: "A Thanksgiving gift for the family greed." I tucked the card under the ribbon of the box. I did not say goodbye. I grabbed my coat and my car keys from the entryway. As I passed the den, I glanced inside. Malcolm was sitting on the leather sofa, deeply focused on the football game playing on the massive television screen. Malcolm was a brilliant, hard-working African-American man who had built a highly successful medical logistics company from the ground up. He was kind, generous, and completely oblivious to the fact that his perfect influencer wife and his welcoming in-laws were actually venomous parasites. I felt a brief pang of sympathy for him, knowing what was about to happen, but he needed to see the truth just as badly as I needed to expose it. I gave him a silent nod from the doorway, turned around, and walked out the front door. The crisp November air hit my face, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt completely free from the suffocating weight of my family's expectations. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and merged onto the highway, putting miles between myself and that toxic house. For 2 hours, I drove in absolute silence, watching the city lights blur past my windows. I felt a profound sense of peace. I knew exactly what was unfolding back at the house. I knew the exact timeline of their dinner. They would have sat down. My father would have prepared his little speech to humiliate me. And then they would have noticed my empty chair. They would have noticed the red velvet box sitting on Ashley's plate. Right on schedule, my phone lit up. The screen flashed with my father's name. I let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started ringing again. Then came the texts. My mother demanding to know where I went. My sister asking if I had left a gift. I ignored them all, keeping my eyes on the dark stretch of highway ahead. On the fifth phone call, I finally pressed the button on my steering wheel to answer via Bluetooth. "What the hell did you put in that box?" my father roared through the car speakers. His voice was no longer smug or arrogant. It sounded like a cornered animal. He was breathing heavily, panic completely overriding his usual authoritative tone. "Samantha, answer me right now." I kept my voice deadpan, completely devoid of emotion. "Good evening to you too, Dad. How is the turkey?" "Do not play games with me," he screamed. "What is the meaning of these documents? What are you trying to do to us?" I smiled, my eyes fixed on the road. "I am simply giving you my contribution to the family. Did you open the envelope at the very bottom, Dad?" There was a frantic rustling sound over the line. I heard my mother crying hysterically in the background. Then an ear-piercing, agonizing shriek tore through the audio. It was Ashley. She screamed with a level of raw devastation that shook the speakers of my car. It was the sound of a woman whose entire fraudulent universe had just been obliterated in front of her wealthy husband. Immediately following her scream, there was a loud, violent crash of shattering crystal, as if someone had swept the entire beautiful Thanksgiving table onto the hardwood floor. I did not wait for my father to speak again. I calmly reached out and ended the call. The silence rushed back into my car, sweet and satisfying. They had wanted to humiliate me over a $40,000 invoice for a car, but they had absolutely no idea what a forensic accountant could uncover when properly motivated. What exactly did I put inside that red velvet box that brought a family of narcissists to their knees in under 10 minutes? To answer that question, we need to rewind exactly 4 weeks before that explosive Thanksgiving dinner. It was a crisp Tuesday afternoon in late October when my mother summoned me for lunch. The venue she chose was an overly pretentious, ridiculously expensive French bistro downtown. It was the kind of establishment where the waiters looked down their noses at you and a simple salad cost $50. I arrived straight from a high-stakes audit meeting at my firm, wearing my usual tailored gray blazer and sensible slacks. I am a forensic accountant. My daily life revolves around uncovering hidden assets, tracing laundered money, and dismantling complex financial fraud. It is a demanding, highly analytical profession that requires sharp observation and absolute focus. My mother, however, viewed my career as a tragic personality flaw. When I approached our corner booth, Brenda was already seated. She was sipping a mimosa and scrolling through her phone. The visual contrast between us was staggering. While I looked like a working professional, my 58-year-old mother was dressed like a wealthy socialite stepping off a private jet. She wore a pristine white cashmere coat, perfectly blown-out hair, and a condescending expression that seemed permanently etched onto her face. "You are 5 minutes late, Samantha," she announced without looking up from her screen. Traffic was terrible coming from the financial district. I replied calmly, sliding into the booth. "I had an emergency meeting with a client." "If you had a husband to support you, you would not be rushing from some dreary office like a common employee." She sighed, finally setting her phone down. She looked me up and down with blatant disgust. "Look at you. 33 years old and you are still wearing those tragic corporate suits. You look like a bank teller. The clock is not just ticking, Samantha. It is practically a fire alarm. No man of any real value is going to look twice at a woman who buries her head in spreadsheets all day." I opened my menu completely unfazed. I was used to this. My mother had spent my entire adult life weaponizing my single status. To her, a woman only possessed value if she was attached to a wealthy man. I like my career, Mom, I said evenly. I am a senior investigator. I do not crunch numbers for fun. I solve major corporate crimes. Brenda rolled her eyes dramatically. A forensic accountant, it sounds so depressing. You just hunt for missing pennies for angry corporate men. Why can you not be more like your sister? There it was. The inevitable comparison. Ashley was 29 years old and the undisputed golden child of our family. She was a lifestyle influencer, which essentially meant she spent her days curating a completely fabricated existence on social media, buying fake followers, and pretending to be a wellness guru. But to my parents, Ashley was royalty. Look at Ashley. My mother continued, leaning forward with a smug smile. Malcolm just bought her a brand new mansion in the most exclusive gated community up north, 7 bedrooms, a custom pool, a temperature-controlled wine cellar. That is what happens when a woman knows how to dress, how to act, and how to cater to a successful man. I took a slow sip of my water. Malcolm was Ashley's husband, and honestly, he was a genuinely incredible person. Malcolm was a brilliant African-American man who had founded a medical logistics company right out of business school. Through sheer determination and 80-hour work weeks, he had built his company into a massive regional success. He was kind, incredibly generous, and deeply devoted to my sister. He worshipped the ground Ashley walked on. Unfortunately, Malcolm was completely blind to the fact that his beautiful, perfect wife was a deeply narcissistic manipulator who viewed him entirely as a walking bank account. And my parents fully supported her behavior. Malcolm is a wonderful husband, I agreed neutrally. He works incredibly hard. Exactly, Brenda snapped. He provides for your sister so she can focus on her brand and her aesthetic. She just hit 100,000 followers. She is a public figure now. And what do you have, Samantha? A rented apartment and a collection of boring blazers. You really need to learn how to present yourself. You are an embarrassment to this family. As my mother continued her monologue about Ashley's glorious new mansion, my professional instincts kicked in. I stopped listening to her insults and started observing her presentation. Sitting on the booth seat next to Brenda was a pristine limited edition designer handbag. It was easily a $30,000 bag. On her wrist gleamed a solid gold luxury watch covered in factory-set diamonds. The coat she was wearing was fresh off a runway collection. My forensic accountant brain began doing the math rapidly. My parents, Thomas and Brenda, ran a mid-level wholesale hardware distribution business. I knew for a fact that their business had been struggling for years against cheaper overseas manufacturing. They had nearly filed for bankruptcy protection 7 years ago. They lived in a nice house, but they were absolutely not pulling in the kind of liquid cash required to fund this level of aggressive luxury. Your father and I are flying to Monaco next month, Brenda boasted, interrupting my mental calculations. First class all the way. We are staying at a 5-star resort on the water. We deserve a luxury break after raising you 2 girls. Monaco, I repeated, keeping my voice carefully neutral. That sounds incredibly expensive. Is the hardware business doing that well? Brenda waved her hand, the diamonds on her wrist catching the restaurant lighting. Oh, your father has made some very smart investments lately. We are doing wonderfully. It is just a shame we cannot say the same for your social life. The waiter arrived and placed the bill on the table. Without missing a beat, Brenda pushed the small leather folder directly across the table toward me. Put this on your card, Samantha, she commanded. You have no children to feed and no husband to impress. Your money is just gathering dust in some boring savings account. It is the absolute least you can do for your mother. I looked at the bill. It was $350 for 2 salads and her expensive champagne. I did not argue. I pulled out my credit card and handed it to the waiter. Arguing with Brenda over a restaurant bill was a waste of energy. By the way, my mother added, applying a fresh layer of expensive lipstick. Ashley expects a significant housewarming gift from you for the new mansion. She mentioned a set of imported Italian patio furniture she has her eye on. It runs about $12,000. I told her you would be thrilled to cover it since you have absolutely no expenses and no real life of your own. I stared at her, feeling a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. $12,000 for patio furniture. The sheer audacity of the demand was staggering. I am not buying Ashley $12,000 patio furniture, Mom, I said calmly. I am actually heading to the bank this afternoon. I am applying for a commercial loan. I am finally buying my own office space to expand my independent consulting practice. Brenda scoffed loudly, drawing the attention of a nearby table. An office space for what? Your depressing accounting job. Why do you constantly try to compete with your sister? You will never be as successful as her. You will never have a mansion or a wealthy husband. Just buy the furniture and stop being so horribly selfish. I stood up, sliding my purse over my shoulder. I am not competing with anyone, Mom. I am building my own future. Thank you for lunch. As I walked away from the table, I could hear her muttering about my horrible attitude. I stepped out of the restaurant and into the crisp afternoon air, feeling my pulse race slightly. I brushed off her insults. I was used to being the family punching bag. I was focused entirely on my afternoon appointment. I had been saving money for years to buy a commercial property for my firm. I had pristine finances, a flawless payment history, and a substantial down payment ready to go. I was completely confident that the loan approval process would be a simple formality. I walked into the grand lobby of my bank with my head held high, ready to take the next major step in my career. I had absolutely no idea that the meeting I was about to walk into would uncover a betrayal so deep and so malicious that it would permanently shatter my entire reality. The glass doors of the bank closed behind me, shutting out the noise of the city street. I was directed to the office of David Thorne, a senior commercial loan officer I had corresponded with for weeks. His office was a glass-walled cube overlooking the main floor, projecting transparency and wealth. I took a seat across from his polished oak desk, setting my leather briefcase on the floor. I handed over my thick, perfectly organized folder. It contained my tax returns for the last 5 years, proof of my liquid assets, and a certified cashier check for a massive 20% down payment. David smiled warmly, flipping through the pristine pages. Everything looks exceptional, Samantha. Given your income trajectory and the success of your consulting firm, processing this commercial mortgage should be incredibly straightforward. I just need to run the hard credit pull to finalize the initial approval. I nodded comfortably. Please do. I watched him click his mouse, his eyes scanning his dual monitors. I took a sip of the sparkling water his assistant had provided, feeling a deep sense of pride. I had earned this. I had built my firm through sheer grit. I was about to own my own commercial real estate. Then the atmosphere in the room shifted. David stopped typing. His warm professional smile completely vanished, replaced by a tight, uncomfortable grimace. He leaned closer to his screen, his brow furrowing. He clicked his mouse a few more times, his breathing suddenly shallow. Is there an issue with the server? I asked, maintaining my relaxed posture. David looked up at me, his eyes darting away nervously. Samantha, there seems to be a major discrepancy here. I am looking at your credit file and the system is automatically denying the commercial loan application. Your debt-to-income ratio is severely compromised. I let out a short, confused laugh. That is absolutely impossible, David. I have zero debt. My student loans were paid off 3 years ago. I own my car outright. I pay my credit card balances in full every single Friday. My credit score is over 800. David turned one of his monitors toward me. Samantha, your credit score is 480. The number hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I stared at the screen, my mind completely blanking for a fraction of a second. 480. That was not just a minor error. That was the credit score of someone in complete financial ruin. Show me the detailed report, I demanded, my voice instantly losing its friendly tone and dropping into the sharp, authoritative cadence I used during hostile audits. Print the entire itemized disclosure right now. David quickly sent the document to his printer. The machine whirred silently in the corner. He grabbed the warm pages and slid them across the desk. I snatched the papers and my eyes flew down the columns of data. Everything looked normal at the top. my credit cards, my paid-off auto loan, my pristine utility accounts. But there, right in the middle of the active liabilities section, was a glaring, massive red flag. It was a home equity line of credit, a massive loan taken out 18 months ago for exactly $150,000. The account was currently marked as 90 days past due. It was an active default. The lender was a subprime secondary financial institution known for predatory lending rates and minimal verification processes. I do not own a home, I said, my voice eerily calm despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. I rent a luxury apartment downtown. I have never applied for a mortgage or a home equity line of credit in my entire life. David pointed to a specific line on the paper. The loan is tied directly to your Social Security number, Samantha. It lists you as the primary borrower. The collateral used for the loan is a residential property located in the suburbs. I traced my finger along the printed address. My blood ran completely cold. It felt as though all the oxygen had been instantly vacuumed out of the room. I recognized the address immediately. It was my parents' house. The sprawling suburban home where I had grown up. The home where my mother had just hosted her country club friends. They did not just insult my career, they stole my identity. As a forensic accountant, I am trained to compartmentalize. I am trained to look at numbers without emotion. In that glass office, the dutiful rejected daughter inside me completely died, and the cold, calculating investigator fully took over. David, I need you to pull up the original origination documents for this loan. You have access to the interbank verification network. Pull the digital signature files. Now. He hesitated, intimidated by my sudden shift in demeanor. Samantha, this looks like a severe case of identity theft. You need to file a police report immediately. If this is a fraudulent loan, you are a victim of a major federal crime. I know exactly what this is, I replied, my eyes locked onto the address on the paper. Pull the signature file. David typed frantically, navigating through the secure banking portals. He finally brought up a scanned PDF of the original loan application. I stood up and leaned over his desk to look at the monitor. There it was, my name printed clearly at the bottom of the digital contract. But the signature was completely wrong. It was a sloppy, rushed attempt to mimic my handwriting. I recognized the cursive loops instantly. It was my mother's handwriting. Brenda had forged my signature. My mind began connecting the puzzle pieces with terrifying speed. 18 months ago, my parents' business was on the verge of total collapse. They were complaining about cash flow problems constantly. Then suddenly the complaints stopped. Suddenly they were buying first-class tickets to Monaco. Suddenly my mother was sporting a $30,000 handbag and a diamond watch. They had not made smart investments. They had not turned their failing hardware business around. They had taken my Social Security number, which they had possessed since I was a child, and they had forged my signature to take out a massive high-interest loan against their own property, using my pristine credit profile to secure the cash. They took $150,000 in my name, and now they were defaulting on it. They were letting the loan rot, destroying my financial future in the process while they drank expensive champagne and criticized my wardrobe. Samantha, David said softly, his face pale with concern. Do you know who did this? Yes, I answered, my voice steady and hard. We need to freeze your credit profiles across all 3 bureaus immediately, he advised, reaching for his phone. I can help you initiate the fraud alerts, but the commercial loan for your office space, I cannot approve it today, not with an active default of this magnitude on your record. This will take months of legal battles to clear from your file. I gathered the printed credit reports and neatly placed them into my leather folder. I zipped my briefcase shut. I understand, David. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Please keep this application file open. I will be back to finalize my commercial property purchase sooner than you think. I walked out of the bank with a posture so rigid my spine ached. The afternoon sun was still shining brightly, oblivious to the fact that my entire family dynamic had just been permanently obliterated. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Emotional abuse was one thing. I had tolerated their sneers, their favoritism toward Ashley, and their endless mockery of my lifestyle. I had accepted my role as the family disappointment. But financial fraud, identity theft, felony forgery, that was my territory. They had stepped into the one arena where I was an absolute apex predator. I got into my car and locked the doors. I did not cry. I did not scream. I pulled out my laptop, connected it to my mobile hotspot, and accessed my secure firm database. I needed to see the full picture. If my parents were brazen enough to steal $150,000 using my identity, I needed to know exactly where every single penny of that money went. I pulled the public property records for my parents' house. I pulled the incorporation filings for their hardware business. I initiated a deep dive background check on Thomas and Brenda. What I found over the next 2 hours sitting in my parked car was a financial house of cards teetering on the edge of total collapse. My parents were completely broke. Their business accounts were overdrawn. They had multiple silent liens against their assets. The $150,000 they stole in my name had been rapidly burned through to maintain their illusion of wealth. But there was an anomaly, a glaring massive inconsistency in their cash flow that made my forensic investigator instincts hum with intense curiosity. Despite their business failing and the stolen loan money drying up, my parents were still receiving a steady, massive influx of cash. Every single month on the 15th, exactly $12,000 was being wired into their joint checking account. I traced the routing number of the incoming wire transfers. The money was not coming from a hardware client. It was not coming from an investment dividend. The monthly $12,000 wire transfer was originating from an entity registered as A&M Consulting. I frowned, tapping my steering wheel. A&M Consulting. I knew that name. I had seen that exact corporate entity name on a file at my office just 2 days ago. My brother-in-law Malcolm had hired my accounting firm to run a diagnostic audit on his highly successful medical logistics company. Malcolm was a smart, dedicated man, but he was noticing strange profit leaks in his quarterly reports. He had handed over his company ledgers to my team to find the missing revenue. I quickly logged into my firm's active client portal and pulled up Malcolm's company ledgers. I ran a cross-reference search for A&M Consulting. The search results populated instantly, filling my screen with rows of data. My breath hitched in my throat. Malcolm's medical logistics company was paying A&M Consulting an exorbitant vendor fee every single month for generic marketing services. I pulled the state corporate registry for A&M Consulting to see who owned the vendor account. The registered owner of the company was Ashley, my sister, the golden child, the perfect influencer wife. She had set up a shell company. She was quietly siphoning hundreds of thousands of dollars out of her husband's business without his knowledge. And she was using that stolen money to secretly fund our parents' lavish lifestyle, ensuring they never had to face the consequences of their own financial failures. I closed my laptop. The silence in my car was deafening. My family was not just toxic, they were a sophisticated criminal syndicate. My parents had stolen my identity to secure a fraudulent loan, and my sister was actively embezzling money from her own husband to keep our parents afloat. They thought I was just a boring, quiet accountant. They thought I would just sit in the background and take their abuse forever. I put my car into drive. I was heading back to my office. I had a lot of work to do. I was going to rip their entire fake, luxurious world down to the studs, and I was going to enjoy every single second of it. I parked my car in this underground garage of my firm, the silence of the concrete structure matching the cold, singular focus settling over my mind. The building was mostly empty at this hour, the quiet hum of the central air conditioning the only sound on the executive floor. It was the perfect environment for what I needed to do. Forensic accounting is not simply about reading numbers on a page. It is about reading the stories those numbers tell. Every transaction leaves a digital footprint, a breadcrumb trail of human behavior, desperation, and greed. I sat at my multi-monitor workstation, the glow of the screens illuminating the dark office. I pulled up the subprime lender's origination file that David had securely forwarded to me. If my parents were going to commit identity theft, they should have been smarter about it. But narcissists are rarely smart. They are just arrogant. They believe their own lies so deeply that they think they are invincible. I started with the initial disbursement of the $150,000. The loan had been approved and funded exactly 18 months ago on a Tuesday morning. The funds were initially wired directly into a secondary holding account, a classic layering technique used to obscure the final destination of stolen money. It took me less than 40 minutes to pierce the corporate veil of that holding account, using my firm's authorized financial tracing software. The money had sat there for exactly 48 hours before being funneled straight back into Thomas and Brenda's primary joint checking account at a local credit union. Now came the mapping phase. I split my monitors. On the left screen, I loaded the raw itemized bank statements of their joint account. On the right screen, I pulled up my mother's public social media profiles. The correlation was not just precise, it was sickening. I cross-referenced the dates of the major withdrawals with her meticulously curated posts. On May 12th, there was a withdrawal of $14,000. On May 14th, Brenda posted a photo of herself holding a glass of champagne on a chartered yacht in Cabo, tagging the luxury rental company with a caption boasting about the rewards of hard work. On July 3rd, a wire transfer of $22,000 went to a high-end automotive dealership. On July 4th, Thomas posted a picture leaning against a vintage restored convertible, claiming his hardware business was booming. On October 18th, $8,000 was drained in a single day to a premium catering and event company. That exact weekend, Ashley threw her extravagant birthday bash at a downtown penthouse, the very same party I was explicitly told not to attend because I would not fit the upscale aesthetic. I watched the stolen $150,000 evaporate line by line, transaction by transaction. They did not use the money to save their failing business. They did not use it to pay off legitimate debts. They used my social security number to fund a glamorous, entirely fabricated reality. They literally financed their arrogance with my stolen identity. Every time my mother sneered at my corporate suits and told me I needed to learn how to dress, she was wearing cashmere coats bought with my compromised credit. Every time my father boasted about his success at the country club, he was standing on the ashes of my financial security. Flesh and blood. The phrase echoed in my mind, tasting like poison. Parents are supposed to be the ultimate safety net. They are supposed to protect you from the harshness of the world. Mine were the executioners of my future. They had deliberately anchored a heavy chain around their daughter's neck so they could sip expensive wine and impress people who did not even care about them. The absolute staggering betrayal of it burned through my chest, severing whatever lingering emotional attachment I had left for the people who raised me. But anger without action is useless. I needed an impenetrable trial-ready case. I did not just need a theory. I needed an execution block. I dug deeper into the metadata of the loan application. Using IP address tracking tools, I traced the digital timestamp and the geolocation data from the moment the fraudulent application was submitted online. The data pinged back to the exact geographical coordinates of my parents' suburban home. Specifically, the MAC address matched the router located in my father's study. I printed the digital log files. Next, I ran a signature analysis on the forged contract. I overlaid the sloppy cursive from the loan document with digitized copies of my mother's actual handwriting from previous tax filings I had helped them with years ago. The forensic software highlighted the specific pressure points, the identical loops, and the unique pen strokes that proved Brenda was the one who had physically forged my name. I printed the visual analysis in full color. I compiled every single document, the fake loan application, the IP geolocation logs, the handwriting analysis, the bank routing numbers. The side-by-side comparisons of their bank withdrawals matched perfectly to their boastful social media posts. I slid the stack of documents into crisp, clear plastic sleeves. I was no longer dealing with a family dispute. I had just assembled a fully documented airtight case of felony wire fraud and identity theft. The evidence was irrefutable. It would hold up in any federal court in the country. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, looking at the thick binder resting on my desk. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought my quiet, disciplined life was a sign of weakness. They were about to learn that the quietest people in the room are usually the ones gathering the most ammunition. I was holding a loaded gun, and I knew exactly when and where I was going to pull the trigger. As I sat staring at the final page of my parents' decimated bank statements, a new anomaly caught my eye. While their business accounts were hemorrhaging cash and the stolen loan money had been completely squandered on luxury vacations and country club dues, they were not entirely bankrupt. Something was keeping their fraudulent lifestyle afloat. A consistent heavy stream of capital was flowing directly into their joint checking account every single month. I leaned closer to my monitor, highlighting the recurring deposits. $12,000 here, $15,000 there. The remitter listed on the wire transfers was an entity named A&M Consulting. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. A&M Consulting. The name triggered an immediate sharp recognition in my mind. It was not just a random corporate moniker. I had seen that exact name listed on an active audit file at my firm just 3 weeks ago. The client for that audit was Malcolm. Malcolm was an incredibly driven, self-made African-American man who had poured his entire soul into building a medical logistics company. His business coordinated the complex transportation of sensitive medical equipment and transplant organs between regional hospitals. It was a high-stakes, high-pressure industry, and Malcolm excelled at it. He was a genuinely good man who loved his wife blindly and treated my parents with absolute respect. But recently, Malcolm had come to our accounting firm looking exhausted and desperate. His company was expanding rapidly, securing massive hospital contracts across the state, yet his quarterly profit margins were inexplicably bleeding. His internal finance team was completely baffled by the missing revenue. He hired my firm for an independent deep dive forensic diagnostic to find the leak. Because he was my brother-in-law, strict conflict of interest protocols meant I was not assigned to lead his audit. However, as a senior investigator, I possessed full administrative clearance to access the firm database. I opened a new encrypted tab and accessed the master ledger for Malcolm's logistics company. I ran a targeted query for A&M Consulting in his accounts payable matrix. The results populated instantly, cascading down my screen in a damning waterfall of automated payments. Malcolm's medical logistics company was being billed relentlessly by A&M Consulting. I pulled the invoice descriptions. The charges were categorized under vague, unquantifiable services like lifestyle brand synergy, social media, aesthetic alignment, and corporate wellness strategy. A medical logistics company transporting human organs does not require lifestyle brand synergy. It was a blatant, fabricated expense. I needed to know exactly who was behind the curtain. I bypassed the bank records and logged directly into the state corporate registry database. I typed in the tax identification number for A&M Consulting and hit search. The official incorporation documents loaded on my screen. The registered owner, sole proprietor, and managing director of the shell company was Ashley, the golden child, the perfect influencer wife who spent her days posting photos of matcha lattes and designer handbags while pretending to be a self-made entrepreneur. She was not an entrepreneur. She was a corporate embezzler. The sheer audacity of her scheme was breathtaking. She had weaponized her husband's absolute, unwavering trust. At some point, she must have convinced Malcolm to let her handle the social media marketing for his business. Malcolm, wanting to support his wife's ambitions, likely gave her administrative access to the marketing budget. Ashley then established A&M Consulting as a shadow vendor, approved her own inflated invoices, and set the payments on a recurring auto-pay schedule hidden deep within the company overhead. I ran a quick summation of the transfers over the past 24 months. Ashley had quietly siphoned over $300,000 out of her husband's life's work. But she did not just keep the money for herself. I cross-referenced the dates of the stolen funds from Malcolm's company with the deposits into my parents' bank account. The timeline was a perfect, undeniable match. Ashley would steal $15,000 from Malcolm on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, $12,000 would magically appear in Thomas and Brenda's account to cover their looming mortgage defaults and fund their fake reality. My parents knew. They had to know. You do not receive hundreds of thousands of dollars in shadow payments from your daughter's consulting firm without asking where the capital is originating. They were all in on it. Thomas and Brenda had stolen my social security number to secure a fraudulent loan because their business was dead, and Ashley was actively bleeding her own husband dry to keep the entire family facade from collapsing. They had built a glittering, luxurious empire entirely on the backs of the two people they respected the least, Malcolm and me. We were just the oblivious funding sources for their narcissism. I spent the next 4 hours printing every single piece of digital evidence. I printed the state registry documents proving Ashley owned the shell company. I printed the corresponding bank transfers showing the stolen money moving from Malcolm's business to Ashley and then directly into my parents' accounts. I printed the forged loan application featuring my mother's handwriting alongside the geolocation data, proving it was submitted from their living room. The physical weight of the paper in my hands was immense. It was a mountain of undeniable catastrophic truth. I did not stop there. I picked up my phone and called my personal attorney, a ruthless litigator who specialized in white-collar crime. I summarized the evidence I had just uncovered. Under his immediate direction, we drafted a formal, heavily detailed criminal complaint for felony identity theft, wire fraud, and corporate embezzlement. The draft named Thomas, Brenda, and Ashley as co-conspirators. I left the office as the sun was setting and drove to a high-end boutique downtown. I walked straight to the gift wrapping section and purchased the most elegant, expensive red velvet box they had in stock. I wanted the presentation to match the magnitude of the destruction it held. I went back to my apartment and carefully packed the box. I placed the drafted criminal complaint at the very top. Beneath it, I stacked the highlighted bank statements, the forged signature analysis, and the irrefutable proof of Ashley's shell company. I tied a thick gold ribbon around the velvet box and slid the place card underneath it, a Thanksgiving gift for the family greed. For the next week, I played my part perfectly. I answered my mother's condescending text messages about what side dishes I was required to bring to Thanksgiving dinner. I listened to my father brag about his upcoming golf trips. I watched Ashley post endless videos touring her new mansion, thanking her amazing husband for his generosity while secretly draining his accounts. I smiled through it all, knowing that the red velvet box was sitting safely in the trunk of my car, a ticking time bomb waiting for the perfect moment. That moment had arrived at the Thanksgiving table. Sitting in my car on the dark highway, the echo of Ashley's agonizing scream and the crash of shattered crystal still ringing in my ears, I felt no remorse. I had merely delivered the truth they had worked so hard to hide. I glanced at the digital clock on my dashboard. It had been exactly 12 minutes since I hung up on my father. 12 minutes for the contents of that box to completely incinerate their lives. Right now, in that beautiful formal dining room, the illusion was dead. Malcolm was not a stupid man. Once he saw those bank statements, once he saw the corporate registry bearing his wife's name, next to the exact amount of missing revenue he had been agonizing over for months, he would understand everything. He would realize that the woman crying hysterically next to him was a parasite who had treated his life's work as her personal slush fund. He would look at Thomas and Brenda and finally see the fraudulent identity-stealing criminals they truly were. My phone vibrated in the cup holder. It was not my father calling back. It was not my mother. The caller ID displayed Malcolm's name. The real fallout was just beginning. I pulled my car onto the shoulder of the highway, the gravel crunching beneath my tires. I stared at the illuminated screen of my phone. Malcolm was calling. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for anger or denial, and answered the call. "Malcolm," I said, keeping my voice perfectly steady. There was a heavy, ragged silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was entirely unrecognizable. It was not the confident, booming voice of a successful CEO. It was the fractured, hollow whisper of a man whose entire reality had just been shattered. "Samantha," he breathed. "Tell me it is real. Tell me the documents in this box are real." Every single page is certified, Malcolm, I replied gently but firmly. The corporate registry, the bank transfers, the IP addresses, it is all absolute fact. I could hear a chaotic symphony of screaming in the background. Ashley was wailing hysterically, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings of the formal dining room. My father was shouting, demanding that someone call the police on me. She says you forged it, Malcolm whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of profound grief and rising anger. Ashley is on the floor sobbing. She is swearing on her life that you fabricated the bank statements because you are a jealous, bitter spinster who wants to destroy her happiness. Thomas and Brenda are backing her up. They are telling me you had a psychotic break. They are saying you have a history of severe mental instability and that I should throw the box in the fireplace. I leaned my head against the steering wheel. Narcissists always use the exact same playbook. When confronted with undeniable proof of their crimes, they immediately play the victim and label the truth teller as insane. Malcolm listened to me very carefully, I instructed, slipping into my professional investigator persona. Do not argue with them. Do not engage with their theatrics. I want you to walk away from that table, go into a quiet room, and call the fraud department of your corporate bank. Ask them to verify the routing numbers for A&M Consulting. They will confirm that the receiving accounts belong directly to your wife. I already did, he replied, a sudden cold hardness entering his tone. I locked myself in the guest bathroom 5 minutes ago. My private banker confirmed it. The accounts are hers. My wife has been robbing me blind to pay her parents. What are you going to do? I asked. I am packing a bag and leaving right now, Malcolm stated. I am not spending another second in this house with these strangers. What do I do next, Samantha? Call your corporate attorneys the second the sun comes up, I advised. Freeze every single joint bank account. Freeze her credit cards. Lock down your business ledgers. Do not leave a single penny accessible. Once they realize the money is gone, they are going to panic, and panicking criminals make mistakes. We ended the call. I merged back onto the highway and drove to my apartment, sleeping soundly for the first time in weeks. The next morning, the retaliatory strike began. I woke up, brewed a cup of black coffee, and opened my personal email. My inbox was flooded with unhinged messages from my parents. The subject lines were typed in all capital letters, radiating pure desperation and rage. I clicked on the first email from my father. If you do not immediately retract this fabricated evidence and apologize to your sister, we will press charges for severe defamation. We are contacting a lawyer to have you involuntarily committed to a psychiatric ward. You have always been a sick, jealous girl. You are dead to us. Fix this immediately or we will destroy your career. I took a sip of my coffee and laughed out loud. They were threatening to destroy my career while I possessed a meticulously organized binder proving they committed federal wire fraud. It was almost comedic. I forwarded every single threatening email directly to my attorney. They were just adding witness intimidation and extortion to their growing list of felony charges. Then my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. Despite everything, Ashley had just uploaded a new video. I clicked on her profile. She had abandoned her usual glamorous aesthetic. She sat on the floor of her mansion wearing no makeup, her hair pulled into a messy bun, crying pathetically into the camera. Hey guys, Ashley sobbed, wiping away fake tears. I usually only share positive energy here, but I am going through a horrific family trauma. A deeply toxic, mentally unstable family member has launched a vicious, unprovoked attack on my marriage. She has faked financial documents to frame me for terrible things, all because she is completely alone and miserable in her own life. Please send prayers for my husband and me as we navigate this dark attack. She did not explicitly name me, but her followers rushed to the comments offering thousands of messages of blind support and condemning the mysterious evil sister. Ashley was trying to control the public narrative, painting herself as the innocent victim of a jealous spinster. She was building a shield of social media sympathy. I closed the app completely unfazed. Instagram likes do not hold up in federal court, and tears do not erase bank fraud. Later that afternoon, I received an encrypted text message from an unknown number. It is Malcolm. Meet me at the Roasting Bean coffee shop on the edge of town in 30 minutes. Come through the back entrance. I grabbed my coat and drove to the inconspicuous cafe. It was a quiet, dimly lit place far from the upscale neighborhoods my family frequented. I found Malcolm sitting in a secluded corner booth. He looked absolutely exhausted. He was wearing a dark baseball cap pulled low over his eyes and a heavy winter coat. The vibrant, successful CEO I knew had been replaced by a man who looked like he had survived a war. I slid into the booth across from him. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "My entire marriage was a financial transaction, Samantha. The woman I love treated my company like her personal ATM. My in-laws treated me like a mark. No, I am not okay. But I am getting there." He reached into his leather messenger bag and slid a thick manila folder across the table toward me. "You were right about the panic," Malcolm said, his eyes burning with intense clarity. "I had my corporate lawyers lock down every single financial asset at 6 this morning. Every credit card, every checking account, every investment portfolio. Complete freeze." And I prompted, "At 3 last night, just hours after you dropped that box on the table, Ashley tried to initiate an emergency wire transfer," he explained, tapping the folder. "She tried to move $200,000 from our joint savings into a private offshore account registered in the Cayman Islands. She knew the game was up. She was trying to grab a golden parachute before the doors closed. The bank flagged it and blocked the transfer because of the lockdown I initiated." I nodded slowly. "She is a flight risk, and my parents are likely realizing that the police are going to be knocking on their door very soon for the identity theft." Malcolm leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the table. The grief in his eyes had been completely replaced by cold, calculated determination. "I am filing for a contested high-conflict divorce immediately. I am filing civil suits against Ashley, Thomas, and Brenda for corporate embezzlement, fraud, and emotional damages. And my corporate board has unanimously voted to press federal criminal charges against my wife." I met his gaze, feeling a surge of profound respect for the man sitting across from me. He was not backing down. He was going to hold them completely accountable. "My legal team is vicious," Malcolm continued, "but they need an expert witness. They need someone who can trace every single dime she stole from my logistics company and map it directly to the fraudulent lifestyle your parents have been living. I need an undisputed expert who can present this complex financial web to a judge and jury." He reached out and offered his hand. "I need the best forensic accountant in the state, Samantha. Will you help me tear their empire down?" I looked at his outstretched hand. My family had spent my entire life casting me as the boring, irrelevant outsider. They had underestimated me, exploited me, and tried to ruin my future. Now the two people they had used the most were sitting in a quiet coffee shop, holding the absolute power to dismantle their entire existence. I reached across the table and firmly shook his hand. "I am already on it, Malcolm. Let us go to work." The next 72 hours were a masterclass in forensic destruction. Malcolm and I practically lived in the secured conference room of his legal team headquarters. With his full administrative authorization, I ripped into the financial architecture of A&M Consulting. I did not just scratch the surface. I tore the floorboards up. The deeper I dug, the colder my blood ran. Ashley had not just set up a simple autopay scheme. She had constructed a highly sophisticated parasitic network designed to bleed her husband dry while completely covering her tracks. She had falsified vendor contracts, forged digital approval signatures from Malcolm's own finance directors, and routed the stolen capital through 3 different offshore holding accounts before the money ever touched her personal bank. Over the course of 24 months, my golden child sister had successfully embezzled over $300,000 from the man who loved her. She used that stolen wealth to aggressively manufacture her perfect Instagram lifestyle. I traced the transactions directly to her posts. The designer bags she claimed to have bought with her influencer sponsorships were funded by Malcolm's corporate overhead. The luxury spa retreats she reviewed for her followers were billed to his medical logistics company as executive wellness programs. She had literally stolen her entire online identity from her husband's sweat and tears. And every month, like clockwork, she funneled a massive cut of that stolen cash to Thomas and Brenda to pay off the fraudulent loan they had taken out using my stolen social security number. They were an organized crime ring operating under the guise of an affluent suburban family. We mapped every single dollar. We printed the ledgers. We handed the undeniable proof to Malcolm's ruthless litigation team and the federal authorities. By Wednesday morning, the legal traps were fully set and waiting to snap shut. I was sitting at my desk at the accounting firm quietly reviewing a completely unrelated audit when my desk phone rang. It was the front desk receptionist. Her voice was trembling with panic. "Samantha, there are 3 people in the main lobby demanding to see you. They are screaming." The younger woman is filming herself on her phone and crying hysterically. "The older woman is threatening to call the local news if we do not fire you immediately. They are terrifying the other clients." I did not panic. I did not feel a single ounce of fear. I simply locked my computer screen and stood up. I knew exactly what this was. Narcissists cannot handle losing control of their narrative. When their lies are exposed behind closed doors, their final desperate tactic is public humiliation. They thought they could ambush my workplace, destroy my professional reputation, and bully me into dropping the federal charges to save my career. They had severely miscalculated. I walked straight to the corner office of my chief executive officer. I had already briefed him on the situation days ago. Because Malcolm was an active client of our firm, and the fraud involved my own relatives, I was legally and ethically required to disclose the conflict of interest to upper management. My CEO, a fiercely protective man with zero tolerance for corporate disruption, had personally reviewed the evidence I gathered against A&M Consulting. He knew exactly what my family had done. I knocked on his glass door. "They are in the lobby," I said simply. My CEO stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. His expression was absolute granite. "Let us go greet your family, Samantha." He picked up his desk phone and pressed a single button. "Bring security to the main atrium immediately. We have trespassers." I rode the glass elevator down to the ground floor, flanked by my CEO and the head of corporate security. As the doors slid open, the chaotic sounds of my family echoed through the massive marble lobby. Ashley was pacing in front of the reception desk. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, holding her phone out on a selfie stick, and streaming live to her followers. She was sobbing violently, her voice cracking with manufactured grief. "You guys, my sister works in this building and she is trying to destroy my family," Ashley cried to her camera. "She is a deeply disturbed, jealous person who faked financial documents to frame my parents and ruin my marriage. I am standing here demanding justice. We are victims of a psychotic attack." Thomas was standing next to her, his face red with fury. He slammed his fist on the marble reception counter. "You need to fire Samantha right now," he bellowed at the terrified receptionist. "She is a criminal liability to your firm. She is forging banking documents. If you do not drag her down here and terminate her in front of us, I am calling the police and having your entire company investigated." Brenda was nodding vigorously, her designer coat draped over her shoulders. "She is a pathological liar," my mother chimed in loudly, ensuring everyone in the lobby could hear her. "She has been insanely jealous of her sister's wealth her entire life. We are here to expose her." I stepped out of the elevator. My footsteps echoed sharply against the marble floor. I stopped 10 feet away from them, my posture perfectly straight, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. I looked at the 3 of them with complete and utter detachment. I did not see my parents. I did not see my sister. I saw desperate criminals throwing a tantrum. Ashley spotted me first. She spun around, pointing her phone camera directly at my face. "There she is!" Ashley shrieked, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "The woman who is trying to send her own parents to prison just because she is a miserable, lonely spinster. Tell them what you did, Samantha. Tell everyone how you faked those bank statements to ruin my life." Thomas lunged forward, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are going to call Malcolm right now and confess to your little scheme. You are going to drop this identity theft nonsense. If you do not fix this immediately, we will sue you into bankruptcy and ensure you never work in finance again." I did not say a single word. I let them scream. I let them humiliate themselves in a room full of corporate professionals, security cameras, and stunned onlookers. My CEO stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of me. He looked at my father with the kind of cold corporate disdain reserved for absolute fools. "You are currently trespassing on private commercial property," my CEO stated, his voice booming with authority. "You are actively harassing one of my senior investigators. I strongly suggest you lower your voice and leave this building before you are removed in handcuffs." Brenda scoffed, stepping up beside my father. "You are protecting a criminal. Do you have any idea who we are? We are prominent business owners. She forged documents to frame our family. She is a liability to your firm." My CEO offered a chilling, razor-sharp smile. "Madam, I know exactly who you are. I have personally reviewed the forensic audit Samantha conducted on A&M Consulting. Her methodology is flawless. Her evidence is indisputable. You did not just steal from your son-in-law. You utilized a fraudulent shell company to launder embezzled corporate funds across state lines. The only liability I see in this room is the three of you." Ashley lowered her phone, the fake tears instantly stopping. The reality of the situation was violently crashing down on her. This was not a family argument she could manipulate. This was a corporate executive confirming that her crimes were fully documented and verified by a major accounting firm. "You cannot do this," Ashley stammered, her voice dropping its theatrical pitch. "Malcolm loves me. He will not believe you." I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, lethal, and perfectly steady. "Malcolm already believes me, Ashley. He locked your accounts at 6 yesterday morning. You tried to wire $200,000 to the Cayman Islands last night and the bank blocked you. You are completely broke. Your shell company is dead. Your Instagram aesthetic is over." Thomas stepped toward me, his fists clenched at his sides. "I am your father," he growled, dropping the public facade and revealing the vicious bully beneath. "You will drop the identity theft charges right now. You will call the bank and tell them you authorized that loan. You owe us that money for raising you." I looked him dead in the eye. "I owe you absolutely nothing. You stole my social security number because your hardware business is a catastrophic failure. You financed your country club memberships with my credit score. You are a thief, Thomas, and you are going to prison." Brenda let out a dramatic gasp, clutching her chest. "You are an ungrateful monster. We gave you everything. We are your family." "No," I corrected her, my tone utterly devoid of emotion. "You are a financial parasite. You chose a designer handbag over your daughter's future." The heavy glass doors of the main lobby suddenly slid open. The timing was so flawless, it felt orchestrated by the universe itself. Two uniformed police officers walked into the atrium, their heavy boots thudding against the marble. Walking closely behind them was a sharp-suited man carrying a thick stack of legal folders. He was a professional process server hired by Malcolm's legal team. The officers bypassed the reception desk and walked directly toward my family. Thomas and Brenda, the lead officer, said, his voice echoing loudly through the silent lobby. "We have federal warrants for your arrest regarding identity theft and wire fraud. Please place your hands behind your backs." My mother let out a blood-curdling scream, the kind of raw, genuine scream that cannot be faked for an Instagram audience. Thomas stumbled backward, his face turning an alarming shade of gray. "You cannot do this," my father stammered, raising his hands defensively. "We are respectable citizens. This is a family dispute." The officers did not care. They grabbed my father's arms, twisting them swiftly behind his back, and locked the steel cuffs around his wrists. The sharp click of the metal echoing through the lobby was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Brenda tried to pull away, crying hysterically, as the second officer firmly cuffed her hands together. The expensive diamond watch on her wrist clinked against the police handcuffs. Ashley stood frozen in absolute terror, watching her parents being detained. She clutched her phone to her chest, her knuckles white. She tried to step backward toward the exit, hoping to slip away in the chaos. The process server stepped directly into her path. He held out the thick stack of legal folders. "Ashley," he said clearly, "you have been served." Ashley stared at the folders like they were radioactive. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The process server did not flinch. Those are formal divorce proceedings filed by Malcolm. Included is a restraining order barring you from the primary residence, an emergency asset freeze injunction, and a notice of civil litigation for corporate embezzlement. Have a good day. He dropped the heavy stack of documents directly into her arms. The weight of the papers forced her to drop her phone. It hit the marble floor with a sharp crack, the screen shattering instantly. It was a perfect metaphor for her fake life. Ashley dropped to her knees right there in the corporate lobby. She clutched the divorce papers to her chest and began to hyperventilate. The facade was completely gone. She was no longer a wealthy influencer. She was a broke, soon-to-be divorced criminal facing federal charges. Thomas and Brenda were marched past me by the officers. My father refused to look at me, staring blankly at the floor in utter defeat. But my mother turned her head as she walked by in handcuffs. Her face was streaked with running mascara, her eyes wide with desperate panic. Samantha, please. Brenda sobbed, her voice cracking. Do not let them do this. We are your parents. Please help us. I looked at her without a single ounce of pity. I gave you my final gift at Thanksgiving, Mom. I hope you enjoy the return on your investment. I turned my back on them and walked toward the elevators. The head of security stayed behind to ensure they were fully removed from the premises. My CEO walked beside me, pressing the elevator call button. He looked at me with a nod of profound respect. Excellent work, Samantha, he said quietly. Thank you, sir, I replied. Let us get back to work. The elevator doors closed, shutting out the sounds of my family's total annihilation. I rode up to the executive floor in complete silence. The heavy, suffocating chain that had been wrapped around my neck for 33 years was finally gone. I had dismantled the narcissists, exposed their crimes, and protected my future. The fallout was entirely their own doing. I walked back to my desk, sat down in my ergonomic chair, and opened my next audit file. I had a long, beautiful, unbothered life ahead of me, and it was finally mine to control. I sat at my dining room table, the surface covered, not with festive decorations, but with the cold, hard proof of my family's absolute betrayal. The time for silent endurance was over. I needed this presentation to be a masterpiece of undeniable truth, a meticulously curated dossier that would leave them with zero room for denial, gaslighting, or manipulation. I was not going to simply tell them I knew about their crimes. I was going to hand them their own execution block. I picked up the first stack of papers, focusing on the identity theft. This was the foundation of their entire fraudulent scheme. I placed the original forged home equity line of credit application flat on the table. Right on top of it, I clipped the professional handwriting analysis, using a bright red marker to highlight the exact unmistakable strokes where my mother Brenda had forged my signature. Next came the digital footprint. I attached the IP address geolocation logs, proving definitively that the fraudulent loan application was submitted using the router inside my parents' suburban living room. This was the identity theft dossier. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Thomas and Brenda had stolen $150,000 in my name, effectively destroying my credit score and my financial future so they could buy designer coats and first-class plane tickets. I slipped these pages into a crisp, transparent plastic sleeve. The second stack was even thicker, and it was entirely dedicated to Ashley. I gathered the A&M consulting files. First, I placed the state corporate registry documents clearly showing Ashley as the registered owner and sole proprietor of the shell company. Then I arranged the side-by-side financial ledgers. On the left side of the page were the exorbitant fabricated vendor fees billed directly to Malcolm's medical logistics company. On the right side were the matching wire transfers showing the money moving from Ashley's fake company straight into Thomas and Brenda's joint checking account. Over $300,000 had been systematically drained from a hardworking, devoted husband to fund my parents' failing lifestyle and my sister's fake influencer aesthetic. I slid this damning evidence into a second clear sleeve. The final piece of the puzzle was the most devastating. It was not just a collection of bank statements. It was a formal, heavily detailed draft of a criminal complaint. I had spent hours with my attorney drafting this document. It outlined severe felony charges for identity theft, wire fraud, and corporate embezzlement, explicitly naming Thomas, Brenda, and Ashley as active co-conspirators. The legal terminology was harsh, precise, and completely unforgiving. It highlighted the potential federal prison sentences for their coordinated crimes. It was not a threat or a bluff. It was a finalized legal weapon waiting for my signature to be filed with the authorities. I placed it in a third and final sleeve. I had visited a high-end boutique downtown specifically to purchase a heavy, beautifully constructed box wrapped in rich red velvet. It looked like a container meant for a priceless piece of jewelry. I opened the lid and carefully placed the 3 sleeves inside. I put the felony charges on the very bottom. I placed the embezzlement proof in the middle. I set the identity theft evidence right on top. I closed the lid, ensuring it fit snugly, and tied a thick, luxurious gold ribbon around it. Finally, I grabbed one of my mother's elegant, heavy cardstock place cards. In sharp, clean handwriting, I wrote a simple message: a Thanksgiving gift for the family greed. I tucked the card securely under the gold bow. The trap was perfectly set, waiting for the apex of their arrogance. I merged my car onto the dark highway, the crisp night air rushing past my windows. The agonizing, ear-piercing scream from Ashley and the violent crash of shattering crystal still rang in my ears from the phone call I had just ended. The sheer volume of that scream confirmed that the detonation had been an absolute success. I knew exactly what was unfolding in that formal dining room at this very second. My father Thomas had undoubtedly forced the red velvet box open with a smug smile, fully expecting to find a check, a signed property deed, or some pathetic symbol of my humiliating submission. He had planned to use that box to assert his dominance in front of Malcolm. Instead, he had opened Pandora's box, exposing their entire criminal syndicate directly on the Thanksgiving table. Malcolm is a brilliant analytical chief executive officer. He built a logistics empire by noticing the smallest details. The moment those papers spilled out of the velvet box and onto the expensive linen tablecloth, his sharp eyes would have immediately caught the A&M Consulting letterhead. He would have recognized the exact vendor name and the specific financial drain he had been agonizing over for months. He would have seen the corporate registry bearing his own wife's name, confirming she was the sole proprietor of the shell company that was bleeding his business dry. The illusion of his perfect, loving, supportive wife and his welcoming in-laws was dead. Malcolm was sitting at a table with predators who had viewed his marriage as nothing more than a highly lucrative financial transaction. He was realizing that the woman screaming hysterically next to him was a parasite who had treated his life's work as a slush fund to pay off her parents' felony debts. As I drove further into the night, the profound silence of my car was broken by the bright glow of my phone screen in the cup holder. It was not my father calling back to scream at me. It was not my mother or my sister attempting damage control. The caller ID displayed Malcolm's name. He had seen the true face of the family. He had processed the contents of the red velvet box. And I knew, as I reached out to answer the call, that the real war was just beginning. I pressed the button on my steering wheel to accept the incoming call. The cabin of my car was immediately filled with a heavy, ragged silence. I did not offer a polite greeting. I did not ask him how he was doing. I simply drove steadily down the dark, empty highway and waited for the inevitable fallout to reach me. Samantha, Malcolm breathed. His voice was entirely unrecognizable. It was not the booming, confident tone of the brilliant CEO who ran a highly successful medical logistics empire. It was the fractured, hollow whisper of a man whose entire reality had just been violently shattered. "Tell me I am having a nightmare. Tell me none of this is real." "It is reality, Malcolm," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly steady and devoid of judgment. "Every single page inside that red velvet box is the absolute documented truth." "I was blind," he said, his voice breaking with a profound, agonizing grief. "I was completely, hopelessly blind. I trusted her with everything I had." "You were in love, Malcolm," I corrected him gently. "There is a massive psychological difference between being blind and being in love. They weaponized your loyalty against you. They used your own decency as a blinder. Tell me exactly what is happening in that dining room right now. It is absolute unhinged chaos, Malcolm explained. The moment I saw the A&M Consulting letterhead, I demanded an explanation. Ashley went completely pale. She tried to snatch the papers out of my hands, but I pushed my chair back. When she realized I saw the state corporate registry documents proving she owned the shell company, she swept the entire Thanksgiving centerpiece off the table. The crystal glasses, the china, the food, it is all smashed on the hardwood floor. Now she is huddled in the corner, weeping hysterically. She is gripping her chest, swearing on her own life that you fabricated every single document in that box. I nodded slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on the road ahead. And what are Thomas and Brenda doing? They are running interference. Malcolm continued, a bitter edge creeping into his tone. Your father got right in my face. He demanded that I throw your box directly into the fireplace. He said you have been harboring a psychotic, deeply rooted jealousy toward Ashley since you were both teenagers. Your mother is currently crying on the floor next to your sister. Brenda is begging me not to listen to you. She is telling me that you are a deeply bitter, unmarried woman who wants to destroy her younger sister's happiness because you have nothing else to live for. They are putting on the most convincing, desperate performance I have ever seen in my life. It is not a performance, Malcolm, I explained, slipping effortlessly into my professional investigator persona. It is a survival reflex. Narcissists do not apologize when they are caught committing fraud. They immediately attack the credibility of the person who caught them. They desperately need you to believe that I am an insane, jealous spinster. Because if I am crazy, then they get to remain the innocent victims. They are trying to drown you in emotional noise right now, to prevent you from processing the actual data. She stole $300,000 from my company, Samantha, Malcolm said. The grief in his voice was slowly beginning to curdle into righteous anger. My company. I built that medical logistics network from the ground up. I work 80-hour weeks to secure those hospital contracts. I bought her that massive mansion because she said she wanted a huge backyard for our future children. I gave her my entire heart. And she was funding your parents' bankrupt hardware business with the money I bled for. I know, I said quietly. They stole my social security number to cover their mortgage defaults, and they used you as their personal corporate slush fund to maintain their country club facade. We were nothing but supply sources to them. You provided the cash, and I provided the pristine credit score. But Malcolm, I need you to focus. You cannot let their theatrics stall you. So have you called the bank to verify the routing numbers yet? I walked out to the driveway to call you, Malcolm replied. I am sitting in my car right now. I locked the doors. I have my secure corporate banking app open on my laptop on the passenger seat. Run the trace, Malcolm, I commanded. Look at the vendor payouts for A&M Consulting in your accounts payable matrix. Compare the receiving account routing number to your wife's private checking account. Do it right now while I am on the line. A heavy silence stretched over the phone line, punctuated only by the rapid, sharp clicking of a laptop keyboard. I merged into the fast lane, waiting for the final nail to be driven into my family's coffin. Then I heard a sharp, ragged intake of breath. It is a direct match, Malcolm stated. The devastation in his voice had completely evaporated. It was suddenly replaced by a cold, hardened, absolutely lethal fury. The brilliant self-made CEO had finally woken up. The man who had navigated cutthroat corporate negotiations to build his empire was no longer the grieving husband. He was an apex predator who had just realized there was a parasite attached to his business. The routing numbers match flawlessly. Malcolm continued, his tone dropping an octave. She is the sole beneficiary. Every single dollar, A&M. Consulting billed to my logistics company went directly into her private offshore holding account before being funneled to your parents. She has been robbing me blind for 2 years while kissing me goodnight. This is what you are going to do next, I instructed. Do not walk back into that house. Do not engage in another screaming match with Ashley. You need to treat your wife and your in-laws as hostile corporate threats from this second forward. I am leaving right now. Malcolm confirmed, the sound of his car engine roaring to life in the background. I am booking a hotel suite downtown. I am not spending another second in their presence. Good, I said. The moment the sun comes up, you need to call your executive legal team. You are going to freeze every single joint account you share with Ashley. You will lock down her black credit cards. You will revoke her administrative access to your corporate ledgers and change every password in your personal network. You need to completely suffocate her cash flow before she realizes the game is over and tries to drain your liquid assets to hire a high-powered defense attorney. I will cut off every financial artery she has by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Malcolm promised. His voice was like grinding steel. They think they can manipulate me with tears. They think they can outsmart me because I loved her. They have absolutely no idea what they just unleashed. We are going to dismantle their entire fraudulent empire piece by piece, Malcolm, I said. We have the paper trail. We have the IP addresses. We have the forged signatures. Are you ready to go to war? I have never been more ready for anything in my entire life, Malcolm said. I will call you tomorrow morning, Samantha. Thank you for opening my eyes. I ended the call, a slow, deeply satisfied smile spreading across my face. My family had spent 33 years treating me like I was invisible. They were about to find out exactly what happens when the invisible accountant decides to balance the books. I slept for 8 solid hours. No tossing, no turning, no guilt. I woke up just as the morning sun began to crest the city skyline. I brewed a pot of dark roast coffee, sat at my kitchen island, and opened my encrypted personal laptop. I knew exactly what would be waiting for me. My inbox was an absolute war zone. There were 42 unread emails. The senders alternated rapidly between my father and my mother, but the subject lines were universally unhinged. They flashed across my screen like desperate warning sirens. Urgent. Call your father immediately. Stop this insanity right now. We are calling the police. I clicked on the most recent email from Thomas sent at 4 in the morning. I read his words with the clinical detached amusement of a scientist observing a trapped, panicked specimen. Samantha, you have completely lost your mind. We are giving you one last chance to fix the catastrophic mess you made last night. Malcolm left the house and your sister is in hysterics. You will contact the bank this morning and tell them you authorized that loan. You will withdraw whatever ridiculous criminal complaint you filed. If you do not drop this absurd identity theft nonsense by noon, your mother and I are calling your firm's managing partners. We will tell them you have suffered a severe psychotic break. We will say you are having delusions and forging financial documents out of a sick, twisted jealousy over your sister's successful marriage. We have already contacted a lawyer about having you involuntarily committed for a psychiatric evaluation. You are sick, Samantha. Fix this or we will destroy your career and lock you away. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling no fear, only a cold, sharp satisfaction. I clicked on the next email, this one from Brenda. It pivoted sharply from aggressive threats to toxic emotional manipulation. How could you do this to your own flesh and blood? We gave you life. We put a roof over your head. You are deliberately trying to rip Ashley's beautiful family apart because no man has ever wanted you. You are a bitter, lonely woman trying to drag us down to your level. Drop the charges, Samantha. Be a good daughter for once in your miserable life and apologize to your sister. They were following the exact psychological blueprint of exposed fraudsters. Deny the crime aggressively, attack the accuser, and immediately reverse the roles of victim and offender. They genuinely believed they could bully me into retracting federal evidence by threatening to smear my mental health to my corporate employer. They thought I was still the compliant, terrified teenager who desperately craved their approval and feared their wrath. They did not realize that sending written extortion threats across state lines was a federal offense. I highlighted every single email. I downloaded them as secure PDF files, ensuring all the digital metadata and timestamps were perfectly preserved. I forwarded the entire batch directly to my ruthless litigation attorney. I typed a brief, simple note. Please add witness intimidation and criminal extortion to the drafted felony complaint. Just as I hit send, my phone vibrated on the marble counter. It was an automated notification from Instagram. I had created a burner account months ago specifically to monitor my sister's spending habits for my forensic investigation. Ashley had just gone live. I tapped the notification. Ashley's face filled my phone screen, but her carefully curated, luxurious aesthetic was entirely gone. She was sitting on the floor of her massive walk-in closet surrounded by walls of designer shoes purchased with Malcolm's stolen money. She wore an oversized, faded gray sweatshirt. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy, unkempt knot. She wore zero makeup and her eyes were severely red and puffy. It was a masterful, highly calculated performance of absolute shattered devastation. "Hey guys," Ashley whispered into the camera, her voice quivering with perfectly timed vulnerability. "I know I usually only post positive, uplifting content here, but my family is going through an unimaginable nightmare today. Last night, my marriage was viciously attacked. A deeply disturbed, mentally unstable family member, someone I have loved and protected my entire life, suffered a massive psychotic break." She paused to wipe away a fake tear, deliberately raising her left hand so her bare ring finger faced the camera lens directly. Malcolm had clearly already taken his ring and left. "This person is incredibly jealous of the beautiful life Malcolm and I have built." Ashley continued, her voice hitching into a manufactured sob. "She has spent months fabricating fake financial documents, forging signatures, and creating insane conspiracy theories to frame me and my parents for terrible crimes. She brought these fake documents to our Thanksgiving dinner just to destroy my husband's trust in me." Ashley buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking rhythmically before she looked back at the lens, her eyes wide and pleading. "My parents and I are terrified. This family member is clearly dangerous and needs severe psychiatric help. Please, I am asking my amazing community for prayers. Pray for my husband who is so confused and hurt right now. Pray for my safety. And pray that the person doing this gets the mental health intervention she so desperately needs before she destroys anyone else's life." The live stream ended. I stared at the black screen of my phone. Ashley was actively attempting to weaponize her audience of 100,000 followers. She was preemptively controlling the public narrative, painting herself as the innocent, abused wife, and branding me as a deranged, jealous lunatic who faked corporate ledgers. She was laying the groundwork for a public defense, hoping that if enough people believed I was insane, Malcolm might doubt the validity of the documents in the red velvet box. She wanted to drown the truth in a sea of social media sympathy. But Ashley had just made a catastrophic, fatal error. Instagram followers do not preside over federal fraud trials. Heart emojis and sympathetic comments do not override matching routing numbers, verified IP addresses, and state corporate registry filings. By posting that video, Ashley had just publicly accused a licensed, credentialed forensic accountant of forging financial documents and committing professional malpractice. She had broadcasted a highly defamatory, libelous statement to a massive public audience in a desperate attempt to cover up her own embezzlement. I immediately pulled up my screen recording software. I captured the entire video from start to finish. I saved the URL, archived the thousands of sympathetic comments, and sent the massive media file straight to my legal team's secure server. Ashley thought she was building an impenetrable shield of public support. In reality, she had just handed me the exact leverage I needed to file a massive civil lawsuit for defamation of character and professional sabotage. She was rapidly tightening the legal noose around her own neck, and she was far too arrogant to even realize it. I closed my laptop and walked into my bathroom to turn on the shower. I needed to get dressed in my sharpest corporate suit. I had a very important meeting to attend. It was time to regroup with Malcolm and finalize the strategy to burn their fraudulent gaslighting empire straight to the ground. I stepped out of the shower, the hot water having washed away the last traces of lingering exhaustion. I dressed in my sharpest charcoal suit, secured my hair in a sleek knot, and grabbed my encrypted laptop. I drove to the outskirts of the city, far from the upscale neighborhoods where my parents and sister liked to parade their stolen wealth. The location Malcolm had chosen was an unassuming, dimly lit coffee shop tucked away in a quiet industrial park. It was the perfect environment for a clandestine meeting away from prying eyes. I spotted him immediately. Malcolm, a brilliant and driven African-American man who had built a medical logistics empire from the ground up, was normally impeccably dressed in custom-tailored suits. Today he wore a plain black hoodie pulled low over his forehead and a heavy winter jacket. He looked exhausted. The profound betrayal of the last 12 hours was etched deeply into the lines around his eyes, but his posture remained rigid with absolute determination. I slid into the vinyl booth across from him. He had already ordered 2 black coffees. We sat in silence for a brief moment, two people who had just watched their entire understanding of family burn to the ground. I locked them out, Malcolm said, his voice dropping into a low, gravelly whisper. I spent the entire morning with my corporate legal team. Every joint bank account is frozen. Her black credit cards are canceled. I revoked her administrative access to my company ledgers and changed every password in my personal network. She tried to initiate an emergency wire transfer to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands at 3 in the morning, but the bank blocked it. She is completely cut off. I nodded slowly, feeling a surge of profound respect for him. He was not letting grief cloud his judgment. He was acting with the swift, lethal precision of a seasoned chief executive officer. I gave her everything, Samantha. Malcolm continued, his hands gripping his coffee mug tightly. I worked 80-hour weeks negotiating high-stakes hospital contracts so she could have her dream life. I bought her that massive mansion. I funded her entire influencer brand. I worshipped her. And she was secretly treating my life's work as a slush fund to pay off your parents' felony debts. They viewed us both as nothing more than supply sources, I explained gently but firmly. You were their unlimited cash flow, and I was their pristine credit score. My parents stole my social security number to secure a fraudulent $150,000 loan because their hardware business was a catastrophic failure. When that stolen money dried up, Ashley stepped in to keep their fake luxurious reality afloat by bleeding your logistics company dry. We are the outsiders they thought they could exploit forever. Malcolm looked at me, his eyes burning with intense clarity. He was finally seeing me not as Ashley's boring spinster sister, but as the ruthless, highly competent financial investigator I truly was. I am filing for a contested high-conflict divorce immediately, Malcolm stated. I am leaving her with absolutely nothing. I am also filing civil suits against Ashley Thomas and Brenda for corporate embezzlement and fraud. Furthermore, my corporate board has unanimously voted to press federal criminal charges against my wife. We are handing all the evidence over to the authorities. He leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the table. But my legal team is vicious, and they need a financial architect to build the execution block. They need someone who can trace every single dime she stole from my company and map it directly to the fraudulent lifestyle your parents have been living. We need an undisputed expert witness who can present this complex web of deceit to a judge and a jury in a way that makes it impossible for them to deny their crimes. He reached across the table, offering his hand. I need the best forensic accountant in the state, Samantha. Will you help me tear their empire down? I did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. I looked at his outstretched hand, recognizing the ultimate alliance forming between the two people my family had underestimated the most. I reached across the table and firmly shook his hand. I already have the preliminary dossiers compiled. Malcolm, I promised, my voice cold and steady. I will map every fraudulent invoice, every offshore transfer, and every forged signature. I will take the stand in your divorce trial, and I will hand the federal prosecutors everything they need to lock them away. Let us go to work. We left the coffee shop an hour later with a flawless, impenetrable strategy. I drove directly to my corporate headquarters in the financial district. I needed to access my firm's secure servers to finalize the forensic reports for Malcolm's attorneys and prepare my own identity theft case against my parents. I walked into the grand marble lobby of my building, flashed my badge to security, and rode the glass elevator up to the executive floor. I settled into my ergonomic chair, booted up my multi-monitor workstation, and began diving into the legal drafts. For the first time in my life, I felt a deep, unwavering sense of control. The toxic chain that had bound me to my family's expectations had been permanently severed. But narcissists do not surrender quietly. When their lies are exposed behind closed doors and their financial lifelines are violently cut, they resort to the only tactic they have left: total, unhinged public manipulation. I had been working for less than an hour when my desk phone rang sharply. It was the front lobby receptionist. Her voice was trembling with absolute panic. "Samantha," she stammered breathlessly. "There are 3 people in the main atrium demanding to see you. They are screaming at the top of their lungs. The younger woman is filming herself on her phone and crying hysterically. The older woman is threatening to call the local news if we do not fire you immediately. They are terrifying the other clients and refusing to leave." I set my pen down on my desk. Pushed into a corner with their bank accounts frozen and federal charges looming, my toxic family had decided to play their final desperate card. They had stormed my corporate office to destroy my professional reputation. They thought they could ambush my workplace and bully me into dropping the evidence. They had severely miscalculated. I calmly instructed the receptionist to remain behind her secure desk and assured her the situation was under control. I did not hang up the phone in a panic. I did not feel a single drop of anxiety. I simply locked my computer terminal, smoothed the lapels of my charcoal suit, and walked out of my office. I headed straight for the grand glass elevator that overlooked the main corporate atrium. As the transparent elevator car began its slow descent from the executive floor, the chaotic scene below came into sharp, undeniable view. The acoustic design of our marble lobby was meant to absorb quiet professional conversations. Instead, it was currently amplifying the shrill, unhinged shrieks of my mother and my sister. Brenda had thrown herself onto one of the expensive leather waiting sofas. She was weeping with theatrical intensity, clutching her chest, and aggressively demanding the attention of every single employee and client trying to pass through the security turnstiles. "Help us," Brenda wailed, grabbing the sleeve of a terrified junior auditor who was just trying to get to his desk. "The senior investigator you employ here is an absolute monster. She is an ungrateful, wicked daughter. She forged federal banking documents to frame her own parents. She is trying to lock us in a federal prison so she can steal our family estate. You are working with a sociopath. She is trying to rob her own mother blind." A few feet away from her, Ashley was pacing frantically in front of the revolving glass doors, actively blocking incoming corporate clients. She had her smartphone mounted on a selfie stick, broadcasting this entire meltdown live to her audience. She had perfectly executed her victim aesthetic, wearing no makeup. Her hair a messy tangle, her eyes red and puffy from forced tears. "This firm employs a dangerous, jealous psychopath." Ashley sobbed directly into her camera lens, her voice echoing off the polished stone walls. "My sister Samantha is a bitter, lonely woman who hates that I have a successful husband and a beautiful mansion. She hacked into our personal accounts and created fake financial evidence to destroy my marriage. She is trying to send our innocent parents to jail. You all need to boycott this accounting firm immediately. They harbor criminals who abuse their own families." I watched them from the descending elevator with absolute chilling detachment. It was like observing a panicked experiment in a controlled laboratory. I analyzed their desperation. They were deploying public shame, the ultimate and most favored weapon of the narcissist. They operated under the delusion that the threat of professional embarrassment would force me into immediate submission. They assumed I would rush down to the lobby, beg them to lower their voices, and agree to drop the federal charges just to save my job. They had fundamentally misunderstood the arena they had just invaded. This was not a suburban living room or a country club luncheon where they could simply shout me down and manipulate the narrative. This was the headquarters of a premier corporate accounting firm that handled billions of dollars in sensitive client assets. Our entire business model relied on absolute integrity, ruthless legal compliance, and a zero-tolerance policy for financial fraud. By storming into this specific building and screaming about forged documents and stolen estates, they were not embarrassing me. They were actively disrupting a highly secure corporate environment. The elevator doors glided open with a soft chime on the ground floor. I stepped out into the lobby. My posture was perfectly straight, my expression an unreadable mask of absolute calm. I did not rush toward them. I walked with deliberate, measured steps, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, signaling my approach. Dozens of my colleagues, from entry-level analysts to senior partners, had stopped in their tracks. Security guards were already converging on the atrium from multiple checkpoints, their hands resting cautiously on their radios. The entire lobby had become a captive audience to my family's desperate, fraudulent performance. Brenda spotted me first. She violently pushed herself off the leather sofa and pointed a shaking, manicured finger directly at my face. "There she is!" My mother screamed, her voice cracking with manufactured grief. "There is the ungrateful thief. Tell them what you did, Samantha. Tell your bosses how you hacked our social security numbers to cover up your own massive debts. Tell them you are a miserable fraud who wants to see your own flesh and blood rot in a jail cell." Ashley whipped around instantly, shoving her camera and selfie stick in my direction to ensure I was perfectly framed in her live stream. "Look at her," Ashley shrieked to her digital audience, tears streaming down her face. "Look at the woman who is trying to tear my beautiful family apart just because she cannot find a man to love her. Drop the fake charges right now, Samantha. Call Malcolm and tell him you lied about the shell company. Call the bank and admit you forged those loan documents, or we are not leaving this lobby. We will stand here all day and tell every single one of your clients exactly how insane you are." I stopped 10 feet away from them. I did not raise my voice. I did not flinch at the camera shoved in my face. I simply looked at my mother and my sister with the cold, calculating eyes of a forensic investigator staring at a closed case file. They were loud, they were messy, and they were completely out of options. They had cornered themselves, and I was about to let the trap snap shut. I did not even have to open my mouth to deliver the final blow. Heavy, measured footsteps approached from behind me. Flanking my right side was the head of corporate security, a towering man who signaled his team to form a rigid barricade around the reception area. Flanking my left side was my chief executive officer. The CEO was a man who managed billions in corporate assets. He despised public spectacles and he harbored a lethal intolerance for anyone threatening his employees. He stepped slightly in front of me, adjusting his suit jacket with an air of absolute, terrifying authority. The ambient chatter in the lobby instantly evaporated. Even Brenda paused her hysterical sobbing, sensing the massive shift in power. "Madam the CEO," began his voice echoing off the marble floors with chilling precision. "You are currently trespassing in a highly secure financial institution. You are actively slandering one of my most exceptional senior fraud investigators." Brenda blinked, completely thrown off balance. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "She is my daughter. She is a criminal who faked bank documents to ruin my family. You need to fire her before she destroys your company too." My CEO did not flinch. He offered a smile sharper than a scalpel. "I am fully aware of exactly who she is, and more importantly, I am fully aware of who you are. I personally reviewed the forensic audit Samantha submitted regarding the shell company your other daughter operates. I have also seen the irrefutable digital evidence proving you committed felony identity theft using Samantha's social security number. Her methodology is flawless. The only criminals in this lobby are the two women throwing a tantrum because their embezzlement ring was finally exposed." Ashley lowered her selfie stick a fraction of an inch. The color drained from her face. She was still live streaming to her thousands of followers, completely forgetting that her camera was now broadcasting a high-powered corporate executive confirming her federal crimes in real time. "You cannot say that," Ashley stammered, her voice losing its manufactured grief and dropping into genuine panic. "That is defamation. We will sue you." My CEO stepped closer, his presence entirely dominating the space. "Truth is an absolute defense to defamation," he stated coldly. "Every security camera in this atrium is currently recording your harassment. You have aggressively interrupted our business operations and publicly defamed my firm by accusing us of harboring a criminal. I am giving you exactly 60 seconds to turn off that camera and walk out of those glass doors. If you are still standing on my marble floor at the end of that minute, my security team will physically detain you, and we will call the local police to arrest you for criminal trespassing and corporate harassment. Furthermore, my legal department will file a massive civil suit against you by the end of the business day for disrupting our operations." The silence that followed was absolute. The countdown had begun. Brenda looked around desperately. She searched the faces of the security guards, the analysts, and the receptionists, begging for someone, anyone, to validate her victimhood. She found nothing but cold corporate disgust. The people in this building dealt with white-collar criminals for a living. They recognized a fraudster when they saw one. Ashley looked down at her phone screen. The comments on her live stream were no longer offering prayers and support. The tide had violently turned. Her followers had just heard a chief executive officer confirm she was running a fraudulent shell company. The chat was exploding with questions about embezzlement and stolen money. Her carefully curated influencer brand was burning to ash right in the palm of her hand. "Mom, we have to go," Ashley whispered, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped her phone. She frantically fumbled with the screen, ending the live stream abruptly. "We need to leave right now." Brenda was not ready to surrender her pride. She puffed out her chest, trying to muster one final ounce of aristocratic indignation. "You have not heard the last of us," she spat, grabbing her expensive designer handbag. "We will be back with our lawyers. You will regret treating a grieving mother this way, Samantha." I finally broke my silence. My voice was calm, steady, and utterly victorious. "You do not have lawyers, Mom. You cannot afford them. Malcolm froze your bank accounts, and you maxed out the fraudulent credit line you opened in my name. The only legal representation you will be getting is a public defender when the federal prosecutors come knocking." Brenda gasped, clutching her chest as if I had physically struck her. The final illusion of her wealth and control had been publicly shattered. She had nothing left to leverage. No money, no status, no obedient daughter to exploit. 45 seconds, the head of security announced, stepping forward and unholstering his radio. Ashley grabbed Brenda by the arm, violently pulling her toward the exit. The golden child was in full retreat. They practically ran toward the revolving doors, their expensive heels slipping on the polished floor. They pushed through the glass, stumbling out onto the busy downtown sidewalk. They did not look back. They flagged down a passing taxi, practically throwing themselves into the back seat to escape the humiliation. I watched the cab merge into the city traffic and disappear. The heavy, suffocating chain that had been wrapped around my neck for 33 years was finally gone. I had dismantled the narcissists, exposed their crimes, and protected my future. The fallout was entirely their own doing. My CEO turned to me, adjusting his cuffs. He offered a nod of profound respect. "Excellent composure under pressure, Samantha. Your ability to remain objective is exactly why you are our top investigator." "Thank you, sir," I replied. "I apologize for the disruption to the lobby." He waved off my apology. "Corporate fraudsters rarely go down quietly. Take the rest of the afternoon to coordinate with your brother-in-law's legal team. I want this handled cleanly." I thanked him and headed back to the elevators. I still had work to do. Exposing them in the lobby was just the public humiliation. Now I needed to ensure the legal trap snapped shut, with absolute, inescapable finality. I returned to my office and immediately dialed Malcolm's number. He answered on the first ring. "They just tried to ambush me at my corporate headquarters," I reported, sitting down at my workstation. "They tried to stage a public scene to force me into dropping the evidence." Malcolm let out a low, humorless laugh. "They tried the same tactic with my legal team an hour ago. Thomas called my attorney and threatened to go to the press with fake domestic abuse allegations if I did not unfreeze the accounts." My lawyer laughed and hung up on him. "Are you all right, Samantha?" "I am perfectly fine," I assured him. In fact, Ashley live-streamed the entire confrontation to her followers. My CEO publicly confirmed her embezzlement on camera before she could shut it off. Her social media brand is officially dead, and we have the entire interaction preserved on our security servers. Malcolm let out a heavy sigh of relief. "Good. My legal team just finalized the paperwork. The civil suits and the divorce filings are ready. We are dropping the hammer this afternoon." "Then let us finish this," I said. "Send me the final injunctions. I will attach my forensic reporting and push it directly to the federal prosecutors." The alliance between the two outsiders was executing flawlessly. We were methodically dismantling the golden child and the narcissistic parents who had thought they could bleed us dry indefinitely. The next few hours were a blur of legal coordination. I compiled the final digital binders, ensuring every single IP address, forged signature, and illicit bank transfer was highlighted, indexed, and cross-referenced. I securely transmitted the entire package to the white-collar crime division of the federal prosecutor's office. By 3 in the afternoon, the legal storm we had engineered made landfall. I was reviewing an incoming email from Malcolm's lead attorney when my personal cell phone buzzed. It was a local news alert. I clicked the notification and a wave of pure, unfiltered justice washed over me. The headline read, Local Medical Logistics CEO files explosive divorce and embezzlement suit against influencer wife. The article detailed how Malcolm's legal team had filed an emergency asset freeze against Ashley, formally accusing her of utilizing a shell company to siphon hundreds of thousands of dollars from his business. But the article did not stop there. It mentioned that the federal authorities were actively investigating the associated parties for wire fraud and identity theft. The house of cards had completely collapsed, and the debris was being broadcasted to the entire city. My parents and my sister were completely trapped. They had no money, no lawyers, and no public sympathy. Their fake reality had been violently replaced by the cold, unforgiving light of the justice system. The ultimate karma had finally arrived, and it was beautiful. I watched the news alert fade from my screen, but the real execution of our strategy was happening simultaneously across the city. The legal traps Malcolm and I had meticulously constructed were not just springing shut. They were crushing everything inside them with absolute merciless precision. At precisely 3 in the afternoon, the emergency injunction Malcolm's legal team filed was fully executed by the banking syndicate. Ashley had stumbled out of her taxi and tried to check into a luxury hotel downtown, desperate to hide from the paparazzi and her rapidly imploding social media empire. She slapped her heavy platinum credit card on the marble reception desk, demanding the penthouse suite. The concierge swiped it, declined. She scoffed, rolling her eyes, and offered a second designer card. Declined. Her voice rising in panic, she aggressively demanded they try her joint corporate debit card. The machine returned a hard stop error code indicating a federal asset freeze. Ashley was standing in a 5-star lobby with literally zero purchasing power. She pulled out her phone to call her private wealth manager, only to find that her cellular service, which was paid through Malcolm's corporate account, had been permanently disconnected. She tried to open her banking app, but the biometric login rejected her face. Malcolm had completely revoked her digital access. She had no cash, no access to her offshore accounts, and no way to call a ride. The golden child was stranded on the sidewalk carrying nothing but a stack of divorce papers and a shattered smartphone. She tried to hail a cab to go back to the sprawling mansion Malcolm had bought her, but she had no way to pay the fare. Even if she had managed to walk the 10 miles to the gated community, it would have been useless. Malcolm had already instructed his security firm to change the biometric locks on every single door and revoke her gate access. Ashley was officially locked out of the luxurious reality she had stolen. Meanwhile, in the upscale suburban cul-de-sac, my parents had terrorized with their arrogance for decades. A fleet of dark federal vehicles pulled up to their manicured lawn. The initial detainment at my corporate office was just the preliminary arrest. Now the authorities were executing a full-scale raid. Armed federal agents and white-collar crime investigators swarmed the property. My parents were forced to stand on their front porch in handcuffs, while agents carried out their desktop computers, financial filing cabinets, and the very luxury items they had purchased with my stolen identity. This was the absolute ultimate humiliation for Thomas and Brenda. The neighbors, the exact same country club friends my mother had spent years trying to impress and belittle, were standing on their lawns watching the entire spectacle unfold. They watched as a heavy-duty tow truck backed into the driveway and hitched up the vintage restored convertible my father had proudly posted on social media. It was being seized as an asset purchased with laundered funds. Federal agents walked out of the front door, carrying clear plastic evidence bags filled with Brenda's $30,000 handbags, her diamond watches, and the cashmere coats she had worn to insult my corporate wardrobe. Brenda wailed loudly, trying to hide her face behind her shoulder to escape the judgmental stares of her wealthy neighbors. But there was nowhere to hide. The facade of the affluent, successful suburban family was completely obliterated. They were being exposed as common thieves in front of their entire social circle. The rumor mill in their gated community would ensure that they were permanently exiled from every country club dinner party and social event in the state. My desk phone rang. It was Malcolm calling from a secure, undisclosed hotel suite. He was watching the aerial footage of the raid from a local news helicopter broadcast. His voice sounded lighter, the heavy, suffocating burden of betrayal entirely replaced by the clean, sharp edge of justice. "We mapped their destruction perfectly, Samantha," Malcolm said, his tone resonating with a quiet, profound victory. "The bank confirmed the total lockdown. My legal team just finalized the eviction notice for the mansion. Ashley has been wandering the downtown financial district for 2 hours because she cannot afford a bus ticket. Your parents are being transported to a federal holding facility, and their assets are being actively seized by the state. They have absolutely nothing left. Not a single dime, not a single ally. They earned every single second of this fallout," I replied, calmly organizing the final audit files on my desk. "They built an entire empire on our backs. We simply removed the foundation. Let gravity do the rest." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city skyline. I felt a deep, unwavering sense of peace. I knew exactly what happens when narcissists are stripped of their wealth, their enablers, and their carefully curated public image. They are fundamentally incapable of taking personal responsibility. For 33 years, I had served as their designated punching bag. I was the scapegoat they blamed for all their internal misery. Malcolm had been their endless supply of cash, the golden goose they bled dry to fund their delusions of grandeur. But now, Malcolm and I were completely untouchable. The financial arteries had been severed, the legal walls had closed in. Without my bank account to drain, without Malcolm's business to embezzle from, and without my presence to absorb their toxic abuse, they were trapped in a burning building of their own making. They were entirely out of victims, and when desperate cornered predators run out of prey, there is only one thing left for them to do. They turn their teeth on each other. Within 48 hours, the spectacular implosion of my family became a masterclass in mutually assured destruction. Ashley's digital empire was the first casualty to completely evaporate. The live stream she had broadcasted from my firm's lobby, intended to destroy my career, became the exact weapon the internet used to execute her. Investigative journalists and online financial sleuths dissected the video, cross-referencing my CEO's statements with the freshly filed public divorce documents and the corporate injunctions. The hashtag Shell Company scammer trended nationally by Thursday evening. Every single brand sponsor severed ties with her by Friday morning. Major cosmetics companies and luxury fashion labels issued harsh public statements distancing themselves from her corporate embezzlement. They did not just cancel her lucrative influencer contracts. They sent aggressive legal demands, requiring her to return thousands of dollars in advance promotional fees. These were fees she could no longer pay because her accounts were frozen solid by Malcolm's vicious legal team. She was a lifestyle influencer with zero lifestyle left to influence. Stripped of her massive mansion, her designer wardrobe, and her wealthy husband, she was forced to sleep on the stained couch of a former high school friend who only took her in out of morbid curiosity. My parents were faring significantly worse. Thomas and Brenda spent 36 grueling hours in a federal holding facility before a judge granted them bail. But their temporary freedom came with an absolutely catastrophic price tag. During their arraignment, the federal prosecutor made their reality agonizingly clear. Because the evidence of their identity theft and wire fraud was indisputable, their only potential leverage to reduce a guaranteed 5-year federal prison sentence was immediate full financial restitution. They had to pay back the $150,000 they stole using my Social Security number plus exorbitant interest plus severe federal penalties. The only asset they had left to their name was the sprawling suburban home they had used to project their false superiority for decades. They were forced to list the property in a desperate fire sale. The bank holding the fraudulent equity line demanded immediate liquidation. The very house where my mother had hosted her lavish country club dinners, the fortress where they had treated me like a worthless servant, was being sold out from under them at a massive financial loss just to keep them out of a federal penitentiary. The neighbors they had spent years sneering at were now walking through their home during rushed open houses, inspecting the luxury items that were tagged for seizure. Without Malcolm's money to steal and my credit score to exploit their toxic alliance instantly fractured. Thomas and Brenda tried to throw Ashley to the wolves, claiming to the federal investigators that their golden child daughter had masterminded the entire financial scheme. Ashley retaliated by telling Malcolm's attorneys that her parents had aggressively forced her to embezzle the corporate funds to pay off their secret business debts. The perfect family was actively tearing each other to pieces, desperately trying to trade each other's freedom for a lighter prison sentence. Then came the phone calls. My personal cell phone began ringing relentlessly. I did not block their numbers immediately. As a forensic investigator, I wanted the digital record of their desperation. I let every single call roll to my secure voicemail. Sitting in my quiet, sunlit office, I poured a cup of black coffee and listened to the audio files of their total defeat with absolute clinical satisfaction. The first voicemail was from Brenda. Her voice was completely unrecognizable. It lacked all the haughty, condescending venom she had utilized at the French bistro just a few weeks ago. "Samantha, please pick up the phone," she sobbed, her words slurring with absolute panic. "We are losing the house. The bank is forcing us to sell everything we own. Your father is having chest pains from the stress. Please, I am begging you, call the federal prosecutor and drop the identity theft charges. Tell them it was a family misunderstanding. We will pay you back. We promise. We are your parents. You cannot let us go to jail. Please, sweetheart, please save us." The second voicemail was from Thomas. He sounded broken, stripped of the patriarchal arrogance that had defined his entire existence. "Samantha, I know we made mistakes," he pleaded. "I know we took things too far with the loan. But Ashley manipulated us. She told us Malcolm had plenty of money to spare. We were just trying to survive the recession. If you testify against us, we are going to lose everything. Just talk to your lawyers, name your price. We will sign whatever you want. Just stop the federal investigation." The final message was from Ashley. The former golden child was no longer demanding $12,000 patio furniture. She sounded breathless, terrified, and utterly pathetic. "Samantha, please help me," Ashley cried. "Malcolm will not answer any of my calls. I am sleeping on a dirty sofa in a studio apartment. My sponsors are suing me for breach of contract. Mom and Dad are telling the police I forced them to steal your identity. I have no money for a defense lawyer. You are a forensic accountant. You know how to fix these things. Please tell Malcolm I am sorry. Tell him to unfreeze my account so I can eat. I will do whatever you want. Just please fix this." I listened to their pleading voices, drinking my coffee in absolute peace. They were begging the boring, ugly spinster to swoop in and rescue them from the catastrophic consequences of their own malicious greed. They wanted me to lie to federal prosecutors, commit perjury, and sacrifice my own professional integrity just to preserve their freedom. Even while facing federal indictments, they still believed they were entitled to my salvation. I deleted the voicemails one by one. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt, pity, or obligation. The financial traps had snapped shut permanently. The illusion they had worshipped was dead. The reality they had meticulously avoided for years had finally caught up to them, and I was not going to lift a single finger to stop their freefall. My cell phone vibrated violently against the polished mahogany of my desk. The caller ID flashed my father's name. They were calling together. I stared at the bright screen, watching it vibrate. I could easily let it go to voicemail again. I could let my attorney handle every single communication from this point forward. But I realized I needed this. I needed to drive the final nail into the coffin myself. I needed them to hear the absolute finality in my voice. I pressed the green accept button and lifted the phone to my ear. "Samantha?" My mother's voice erupted through the speaker, breathless, frantic, and completely stripped of her usual arrogance. "Oh, thank God." "Thomas," she picked up. "Samantha, please listen to us." "I am listening, Brenda," I replied. Using her first name felt incredibly empowering. It instantly stripped her of her maternal authority and reduced her to exactly what she was: a desperate fraudster calling an investigator. "We are losing the house today," Thomas interjected, his voice trembling so badly he sounded like a frightened child. "The bank attorneys are outside right now. They are assessing the property for the foreclosure auction. We have nowhere to go." "You have made your point. You proved you are smarter than us. Now please call the federal prosecutor. Tell them you authorized the loan. If you do not do this, we are going to a federal penitentiary." "You are going to a federal penitentiary because you committed federal wire fraud," I corrected him, delivering the words with the clinical precision of a judge reading a sentence. "I merely provided the documentation of your choices. We are your family." Brenda sobbed loudly into the receiver. "How can you be so utterly heartless? We raised you, we fed you, we gave you everything. You gave me a master class in financial parasitism," I countered. "But since you want to discuss family, let us negotiate like family." The line went dead silent. They actually thought I was capitulating. I could hear the desperate, greedy hope returning to their erratic breathing. "What do you want?" Thomas asked eagerly. "We will do whatever you say." "I will contact the federal prosecutor," I stated slowly, letting every single syllable sink in. "I will submit a formal victim impact statement officially requesting leniency, and I will agree to a civil settlement that could potentially keep you out of a federal prison cell." "Oh, thank you. Thank you, sweetheart." Brenda wept, her voice dripping with sudden sickening relief. "I knew you still loved us. I knew you would not let them lock us away." "I am not finished," I snapped, cutting her off instantly. "I will only submit that statement after you repay the bank every single cent of the $150,000 you stole using my identity. I want the principal. I want the accumulated interest. I want the late fees and the federal penalties. You will liquidate your home. You will sell your cars. You will empty whatever pathetic retirement accounts you have left. You will make the bank entirely whole, and my credit report will be wiped completely clean of your crimes." "Samantha, be reasonable!" Thomas pleaded, the panic aggressively returning to his voice. "If we pay all of that back to the bank, we will have absolutely zero equity left. We will be completely destitute. We will be living on the street. That is the mathematical reality of restitution." Thomas Feiss replied coldly. "You steal, you pay it back. I am a forensic accountant. I do not negotiate discounts for identity thieves." "But what about us?" Brenda wailed. "What about our relationship? We are your parents. Does that mean absolutely nothing to you?" I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, looking out through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city skyline. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. "You want to talk about the value of our relationship?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper. "You established the exact market value of our family bond 18 months ago. You appraised my worth as a daughter, and you set the price yourself. You decided that my future, my financial security, and my trust were worth exactly $150,000. You sold me out for luxury vacations and designer coats." "Samantha, please," Thomas begged. "You priced our relationship, Dad. Now you get to pay the bill." "You are a monster!" Brenda screamed, finally dropping the victim act and revealing the true venomous narcissist beneath. "You are a cold, ungrateful, vicious monster." "I am the monster you created," I replied evenly. "And I am officially closing this account. From this second forward, do not ever call this number again. Do not email me. Do not try to contact me through my firm. If you ever attempt to reach out to me again, I will personally ensure the prosecutor seeks the maximum mandatory sentence. Have a wonderful life." I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could hear Brenda still screaming insults through the tiny speaker. I pressed the red button, cutting her off mid-sentence. I opened my phone settings, selected my father's number, and pressed block. I did the exact same thing for my mother. Then I found Ashley's number and blocked her too. I set the phone face down on my desk. The silence in my office was profound. It was not the heavy, oppressive silence of secrets and unspoken resentments that had plagued my entire childhood. It was the crisp, clean silence of absolute liberation. The emotional tumor I had carried for over 3 decades had been surgically removed. The iron boundary was permanently set. There was no going back, and I had never felt more alive. 4 months later, the harsh, bitter chill of late December settled over the city. But inside my newly purchased downtown penthouse, the air was warm and perfectly still. I had finalized the commercial loan for my firm's new headquarters back in November, right after the federal indictments dropped and my credit profile was legally scrubbed of my parents' fraud. But I had also treated myself to a massive personal upgrade. I bought this luxury residential loft outright. No mortgages, no CO signers, just the hard-earned capital of a forensic accountant who knew exactly how to manage her assets and protect her peace. I walked across the heated oak floors wearing a comfortable cashmere sweater that I bought for myself simply because I liked how soft it felt. The gas fireplace flickered with a steady, calming rhythm. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, thick white snowflakes drifted down, blanketing the bustling city streets in a layer of pristine silence. It was Christmas Eve. For the first time in 33 years, I was not bracing myself for passive-aggressive insults about my wardrobe. I was not enduring forced, exhausting family dinners. I was not paying exorbitant restaurant bills to fund my sister's fake reality, or listening to my father boast about a hardware business that was actually dead. I was entirely alone by choice, and it was absolutely glorious. A soft chime echoed from my private elevator access panel. I walked over and pressed the intercom button. The night concierge politely announced that a special delivery had just arrived for me. A moment later, the elevator doors slid open directly into my foyer. The concierge stepped out carrying a massive, breathtaking arrangement of white winter orchids, silver branches, and deep green pine. It was not a generic last-minute holiday gift. It was a deliberately curated piece of art that commanded the entire entryway. I thanked him, tipped him generously, and carried the heavy arrangement to my marble kitchen island. Tucked into the center of the pristine white blooms was a thick, textured envelope. I slid my finger under the wax seal and pulled out the handwritten card. Samantha. The note began in strong, bold handwriting. The final divorce decree was signed by the judge this morning. The asset recovery is completely finalized, and the medical logistics company just closed our biggest regional hospital contract to date. I am spending Christmas with my own parents, surrounded by people who actually love and respect me. I wanted to send this as a small token of my eternal gratitude. You did not just save my business. You saved my life. You handed me the truth, when everyone else was content to let me live in a lie. You burned the illusion down, so I could finally see the reality. Thank you for being the only real family I gained from that nightmare of a marriage. Merry Christmas, Malcolm. I smiled a genuine deep smile and traced my thumb over his signature. Malcolm had made it out alive. He had survived the parasite, purged his life of the toxic infection, and rebuilt his empire stronger than ever before. The alliance of the outsiders had emerged completely victorious. We had not just survived the golden child and the narcissistic parents, we had absolutely conquered them. I walked over to my custom wine fridge and pulled out a bottle of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon. It was the kind of heavy, complex, expensive red wine you only open to celebrate something permanent. I uncorked the bottle, letting the rich scent of dark berries and aged oak fill the air, and poured a generous measure into a heavy crystal goblet. Holding the glass by the stem, I walked slowly back to the massive living room windows. I looked out at the falling snow, watching the city lights blur into a soft, glowing canvas. I knew exactly where my former family was tonight. I did not have to hire a private investigator or check social media to know the reality of their consequences. Thomas and Brenda had barely avoided federal prison by pleading guilty to the fraud charges and immediately liquidating every single asset they owned to pay the bank full restitution. They were currently living in a cramped, drafty two-bedroom rental apartment on the industrial outskirts of the city, surviving solely on Social Security checks. They were confirmed social pariahs, permanently blacklisted from their country clubs and entirely ignored by the wealthy friends they had spent decades desperately trying to impress. Ashley was faring no better. She was currently working a minimum wage retail job at a local shopping mall, having been strictly ordered by the divorce judge to secure immediate verifiable employment. Her Instagram account was permanently deleted. Her luxury mansion was sold to a stranger. Her fake glamorous life was entirely erased from the internet and from reality. The most remarkable part of it all was that as I thought about their miserable, cramped existence, I felt absolutely nothing for them. I felt no lingering anger about the identity theft. I felt no residual pity for their poverty. I felt no guilt for executing the legal strikes that brought them down. The opposite of love is not hate. It is complete, absolute indifference. They were strangers who had tried to rob me, and I had simply deployed my professional skills to stop them. They were no longer active characters in my story. They were just closed case files archived in a dusty box, completely irrelevant to my present and my future. I looked at my reflection in the dark, cold glass of the window. I saw a 33-year-old woman who had completely rewritten her own destiny. I saw a brilliant investigator, a wildly successful business owner, and a fiercely independent survivor who had forged her own impenetrable armor. I did not need a wealthy husband to validate my existence. I did not need a golden child sister to measure myself against. I certainly did not need toxic, manipulative parents to dictate my worth. I had built a magnificent, bulletproof life with my own two hands and my own brilliant mind. I raised my crystal glass to the reflection staring back at me, acknowledging the warrior who had fought the hardest battle and won the ultimate war. I took a slow, deep sip of the heavy red wine. It tasted like absolute, uninterrupted freedom. The story of Samantha powerfully illustrates one of life's most difficult but liberating truths. True self-worth is never defined by those who seek to exploit you, and the ultimate victory over a toxic environment is absolute indifference. For years, Samantha was cast as the boring, irrelevant outsider by a family that measured value solely through the lens of fabricated social status and material wealth. Yet, when faced with the ultimate betrayal, the theft of her identity and financial security by her own flesh and blood, she didn't resort to desperate pleas for love or dramatic displays of vengeance. Instead, she utilized her expertise, established impenetrable boundaries, and walked away. This narrative teaches us that we cannot heal in the same environment that broke us. Narcissistic individuals will often use the concept of family as a weapon to demand unconditional loyalty while offering nothing but conditional, transactional affection in return. Samantha's journey from a dismissed daughter to a triumphant, fiercely independent woman demonstrates that we are not obligated to set ourselves on fire just to keep toxic people warm. Forgiveness and peace do not require reconciliation. Sometimes they simply require a heavy door closing and a locked deadbolt. When we stop fighting for a seat at a table where we are consistently disrespected, we free up our energy to build our own table. Samantha found her true power not when she dismantled her family's empire, but when she realized she simply didn't care about them anymore. The opposite of love isn't hate. It is complete, unbothered indifference. By stripping away the emotional noise and focusing on undeniable facts, she protected her peace and reclaimed her future. Take a hard look at the relationships in your life today, and dare to cut the ties that drain your spirit, so you can finally build the magnificent, peaceful life you truly deserve.